Thanks, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. My name's Sarah Williams. I'm one of the careers consultants and the team here at Newcastle. Delighted to be joined by an absolute stellar panel of our alumni from Newcastle this afternoon who've given up some of their time to talk to you today around about themes around exploring working life in London as well. I was just saying to the panelists before we started, I myself have spent a little bit of time living and working in London, so I might be able to chip in where I can as well. But in terms of the format for this afternoon's sessions, we're going to focus it around, I guess, four main sort of categories in terms of questions. So that might be a prompt for you all to think about some questions that you might want to ask our alumni around these themes as well. So we are going to be going into questions around about exploring like working culture and our panelists' experiences of that. We'll then maybe kind of move a little bit into some questions around about what employers are looking for, followed by some of the pragmatics, relocation, accommodation, everyday living in the capital there. And last but no means least, and arguably most importantly, how it builds your network as well, as somebody who might not have kind of an immediate network in and around that region. So I suppose we'll go into kind of that. If you can pop your questions in the Q&A function as well, that would be great. I think you can upvote questions in there. My colleague Gemma's on there monitoring that chat too. And then at the end, I've got a little bit of a reminder as well around about some of those mentoring sessions, which I must remember to talk to you about as well. So without further ado, I think if we can just at first kind of go through the panel, if you guys can just give yourselves a little sort of like a quick introduction. So who you are, sort of and current job title, and just very sort of high level overview of kind of what you're sort of doing in that role at the moment. So Sean, you're the first person on my screen, so I'm going to come straight to you if that's all right. If I can just hand over to you for a quick introduction, please.
Yep, sure. So I'm Sean. I graduated the MBA course, I think it's 2018 or 2019, can't remember now. But I am now a senior manager at PwC. I work in the deals part of the business, and sort of in my day-to-day role, I kind of do like a lot of operations and technology diligence in sort of like the transaction environment, and then kind of any post-deal separation, integration kind of planning and execution as well. So very varied role, very interesting, and I'm sure we'll get a bit more into it as we go.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Yeah, it sounds very varied. That's great. Thanks very much, Sean. Cheryl, again, I'm just working across the top of my screen. If you can just give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and your also very interesting job title, that would be great.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. Very nice to meet you today. So I'm Cheryl. I graduate from the master degree in digital business and e-marketing from Newcastle University, I think like 3 years ago. And then after that, I moved to London. I work at Amazon, the headquarter office, and I have been working for Amazon like nearly 3 years now. At the moment, I'm a senior account manager working on the Amazon Marketplace department. And my role here is to leverage the deals and promotional strategy for the UK top sellers. So if you ever buy on Amazon, you probably might notice some of the names that pop up all the time. So those names is the seller that I manage. And then if you heard about like spring sales or Prime Day or Black Friday and Cyber Monday, or if you buy any deals from Amazon, it's part of me and my teamwork to convince the seller to put product on sales and on discount. So yeah, basically this is what I did. And then very happy to be here.
That's so interesting. Yes, I think I might have been on the receiving end of some of your work there, Cheryl, as an Amazon user. Thanks so much. And then obviously, last but by no means least, if we can come to Beth, please.
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. My name's Beth. I graduated back in 2020, graduated in modern languages and business, and then did a bit of a pivot in kind of career, I guess, and got a job in finance. I now work in investor relations for a small bank called Secure Trust Bank. So yeah, kind of day to day involves a bit of a hybrid of things, similar to Sean, very varied, somewhat related to some marketing, somewhat related to dealing with the actual people that buy our shares. We're publicly listed, a bit of financial planning and analysis. So yeah, a whole hodgepodge of stuff.
Well, you all sound like incredibly busy people as well. But yeah, all really interesting stuff. Thanks so much for that introduction. So so just a reminder, students, please use that Q&A function on there for kind of questions for our panelists. But I'm going to kind of like kick off, if that's okay, around one of those sort of 4 themes. So the first one sort of being around sort of working culture. So for all the panelists, the first question being, what are your experiences of working culture in London? I'm just going to go back from the panel that I started with. So Beth, if you don't mind kind of starting with that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I think it's definitely an interesting one, because you find if you work in a company with different offices in different locations, there definitely is a kind of perception that London culture is very kind of hustle heavy, and I guess it's historically, if you go back pre-COVID, everyone was coming in 5 days a week to the office. It had a bit of a different feel to how it does now. Tuesdays and Thursdays, you won't get a seat on the tube, but Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're probably all right. I think the working culture piece is really heavily influenced by the people at the top. So I actually ended up changing roles about this time last year to join the company I'm in now, partly because of that working culture piece. I found that the company I was in was very heavily influenced by kind of that stereotypical American tech company culture. But that's definitely not the case kind of across the board. And I think it's also something to really be aware of when applying for jobs, is what is the culture you want to work in? Because for some people, the kind of people that you're around day to day have a really huge impact on your working life. For some people, they're quite happy to prioritize other things. So I guess taking account of what is it within a culture that is important to you. Is it how much learning and development you can do? Is it how much you get to travel? Is it how much you get to speak to senior members of staff? And every company will basically have a different culture depending on what the CEO, the CFO dictates. I'm sure in a company the size of Amazon or PwC, it's also going to have a completely different look and feel to a small family office. So having an idea of what it is you want out of the company, I think is probably a really important stepping point.
Yeah, no, I think a really important sort of reflection there that sometimes can kind of get missed off, I think, a little bit. So sometimes in sort of career planning, where the goal is to kind of get the first step on the ladder and kind of get some experiences. But yeah, it's interesting how much culture can kind of heavily influence your sort of working day to day. Sean, sort of the same question for you, really. Anything else that you would like to add to that in terms of your sort of specific experiences of working in London?
Yes, I mean, London, I've found, because I've been at PwC the whole time I've been working in London. Beforehand, I was at Virgin Money, so based in Gosforth, actually. And there's definitely sort of like much more fast-paced, competitive nature as sort of working in London. I think that's possibly partly like related to kind of the sector and the work that you do. So having worked in deals for 7 years, like it is fast-paced, timeframes don't really change. Work can mount up and it can be like tough at times. However, I found it sort of like incredibly collaborative. You're often working with very high performing individuals, which pushes you to raise your own standards. And you're sort of like working kind of side by side with sort of like very senior, very intelligent people all the time. So it's definitely sort of fast paced in terms of kind of like a working culture, but I quite enjoy it, and it's why I've been at PwC for so long.
Yeah, great, good stuff. That's actually just triggered another question I'm going to actually ask after this. But last but not least, Cheryl, what have your experiences of been working in London from like a working culture perspective?
So to be honest, Amazon is the first company that I work for in London.
Hmm.
So I could share about the working culture at Amazon specifically,
Hmm.
but
That'd be
not
great.
like in London in general.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to the working culture, it really depends on the company
Mm.
because each company will have their own culture of working. And it doesn't matter whether you work in London or you work in New York or you work in Newcastle. Like everywhere, if you work for a specific company, probably you will find their own culture of working.
Mm.
So for Amazon, if any of the student here interested, we very value the leadership principle. So if you search on Google, you might find like 10 or 12 leadership principle, and those leadership principles shape our working culture. And everything that we work, the approach, the way of working, the way of communication, we will lean towards those leadership principles. For example, like customer obsession, whether we will obsess with the customer and obsess with the sellers that on Amazon, or earning trust, or like thinking big, or invent and simplify. So all of those things want to shape our working culture. And then I just want to share some highlight based on my working experience of nearly 3 years working at Amazon. Is firstly, is very tech driven because we are the big tech company. So meaning that all of the employees should be able to use technology and feel confident with technology. And when nowadays, probably you might hear a lot about AI, automation, machine learning, and maybe it's very kind of like ambiguous at the moment and unclear at the moment. But we as employees at Amazon, we need to be an early adopter for those
Mm.
technology, meaning that we have to learn, we have to use, we have to adopt those technology even though it's a bit scary and ambiguous, but we have to figure out the way. And honestly, we're still like exploring those new tools and try to
Mm.
kind of like create some prototype or tools from AI to use in our daily working basis. So it's very tech driven. And the second thing is very data driven as well. So all arguments you make or like all decision you make at the company, you need to back up with data. And then your performance or your scorecard will be monitored with real-time data. So everything will evolve around data. There is no way to like make things up or fake things because everything is like, okay, so how much money my seller make, like how well the customer buy. So very data driven.
Mm. Mm.
And then the third thing, I just want to share that probably working in the big city or like fast moving company, you might have some challenge with the work and life balance because all company they will require a lot from you, and then they will kind of like expect a lot from you as well. For example, at my company, the slogan that we use is like work hard, smart, and fast at the same time. So this is kind of like the guidance, and then this is the expectation that the company will set on you, especially big company in big city. So sometimes I find that quite challenging in terms of like the harmony between work and life.
Mm.
But I guess it's just the trade-off. And then also in the early stage of your career, those like fast-moving company or big cities is very important and very beneficial for your personal learning and development.
Mm. Mm. Great, that's really insightful. I think, yeah, I think probably like Amazon's a really great example of a company that I think are probably quite transparent about their culture and in their job descriptions. It's kind of sort of, I suppose, kind of quite well known. There is a question that I want to follow up with Beth and Sean, but just to stick with you, Cheryl, just for a minute. It was a really interesting point that you said there around about, I guess, not being afraid of kind of using or kind of adopting new technologies. Have you got any sort of like, I suppose, like sound bites or bits of advice for either our current students or recent graduates of like what they can kind of potentially do to sort of help upskill in those areas, whether that might be like just generally demonstrating an interest in that or any kind of online certificates or anything like that that you've seen that can be useful for people to have if they were interested in working at Amazon?
So for that kind of adoptions for new
Mm,
technology, I
mm,
could break it into two different aspects. The
yeah.
first one is keep yourself updated with all the new tools, new information, like all the change that's happening right
Mhm.
now. So it's purely like information and keep yourself updated with that.
Okay.
And the second aspect is try to learn and use it. Maybe not necessarily a very like advanced thing, but try to be super confident with ChatGPT, Gemini, and then if you have more time, explore all the AI tools, maybe some specific AI tools for citation and referencing is very useful for your seminar writing. I'll be honest, it saves you lots of time, or maybe familiar from make yourself familiar with tools for designing, video editing, or content creation,
Mm,
something like that. And if you can become more advanced and you
mm,
really want to learn things, you could get some certification.
mm,
And there are a lot of certification online. There are a
mm,
lot of courses from Udemy and also
mm.
courses from AWS as well. So
Yes.
personally, even though I work at Amazon, I use AI, but I still learn outside, like
Mm,
outside course to get myself a certification from AWS. So maybe if you have time now, you haven't worked yet and you have more free time, I would highly recommend to spend those free time into updating yourself with information, practicing using it every day, and then learning some certification.
mm,
Maybe
mhm.
just like a basic certification.
Great. That's super, super useful. Thanks so much, Cheryl. I think a lot of those things you're talking about are like pretty much free to do online as well, aren't they? So yeah, Udemy and AWS certificates. Yeah, great, good stuff. So just back to Sean and Beth there. I suppose a follow-up question from the first one is around about like we know that kind of working culture can be important, particularly around making decisions about where you might want to work. Have you got any sort of like hints and tips for our attendees today in terms of what they can do to kind of help understand or research company cultures in general? So that might be things that you did or other things that you've seen other people do that can be sort of quite useful. To know whether Beth, if we can come to you first, that would be great. Oh, you are on mute, Beth. No, still on mute. All right, we'll see if Beth can come off mute. But Sean, perhaps if you could answer that question in the meantime, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So at PwC, yes, there's probably quite a lot that you could read online. However,
Mm,
there's many, many different teams that are run sort of like kind of very small. Like my team is only about 28 people. So we have a different culture to,
mm,
a team that would sit in our other London office. So while Glassdoor is a fantastic sort of uh, resource that you could use to understand what the company culture is. I think it's really important for when you're going to big companies and interviewing at sort of like very large companies like PwC,
mm,
is to ask your interviewers what their experiences are, like
yeah.
get to know who they are, and then sort of like individually trying to look them up and see what they've done. Take a look, see how long people have been in that specific team, like get a real good understanding of what the culture is like at that level, because it's too the comments on Glassdoor will be both positive and negative, and
Mm,
the
mm,
general stuff that you'll read online will be too generic to apply
yeah.
to the specific teams that you'll be placed in. So really take the opportunity in any interview to really sort of like hone down and get some good questions in to your interviewers to be able to assess the culture.
Yeah, that's a really great tip. Yeah, some good ideas to ask questions at the end of your interview as well. Thanks. Beth, are we back?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, success,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I would echo what Sean says really in
Mm,
terms of I think people get very nervous about interviews and, rightly so, that they can be nerve-wracking, but it's super important to realize that you're testing them as much as they're testing you. And
yeah.
you can ask the right questions that will help you understand kind of what their expectations are in terms of that work-life balance aspect, what their expectations are in terms of helping you progress as an individual, because especially at the
Mm,
start of your career, I think it's super important that you're working somewhere that wants to help you succeed, whether that's through actually undertaking qualifications themselves, or whether that's through providing networking events, whether that's through if you're part of a graduate program, speaking to the graduates who are on that program to find out, are there actually events that you can go to? Are there, the old place I used to work at, we used to host kind of quarterly learning sessions for all the graduates on an off-site basis. Things like that, which help you bond with your peers. And then as you kind of move through to other jobs, I think maybe this is a bit of a woo-woo thing to say on a university panel questions, but I do think you just get a gut feeling. I think, ask the manager that is interviewing you honest questions. I don't think you do yourself any favors by not kind of asking what you really want to ask, and that really is the only way to get a grip on a company culture. And as Sean says, it's so different team to team that my advice to people is always speak to the person who will be directly managing you, because they will really be influencing your life if you're spending 40 hours a week with them.
Yes, I can attest to that. That's true. Thanks so much. I think that's really great insights there, and kind of sort of like, working culture with some of those follow-up questions. I wonder whether we can move a little bit more on to questions around about skills. So I know, Cheryl, you talked a lot before around about kind of leadership skills with Amazon and how important they are. But maybe a slightly rogue question, but for all of you, are there any skills you didn't realise were important until you entered the workforce? Cheryl, maybe we can kind of go back and start with you on that one. So skills that you didn't realise actually were going to be really important until you started your job.
Very good question. I would think, can I give a broader answer?
Absolutely.
It's not just within the workplace, but also for an adult life.
Sure.
In
Go for it.
general. And I wish that I could learn it before. Firstly is personal investment. I think that is super useful skills that everyone should have, because if you want to move to London, it's a super expensive city. So having a personal finance skills is very important, like how to spend your salary, how to save, make savings, and how to invest just on a personal level. If you're come from a non-financial background, that could be super useful for you. So maybe if you have time now, maybe get yourself to be familiar with that. That's the first thing. The second thing, that any types of a tools using skills. So I think when I was studying at the university, there are some modules to show how to use some tools like Tableau for performance metric, or maybe what is the name of that? Power BI.
Yeah.
So all that kind of tools using skill is super crucial, because if you go into an office work, then definitely you will need to use that skills. And now, because Excel skill, Microsoft skill is essential, is everyone know how to use that. So a little bit of more advanced gonna help you to stand out during the application process. So if you can use I don't know, maybe if you work in marketing, if you can use Amazon DPS, like some tools to run advertising, or you can use the Tableau or Power BI. It just helps to leverage your CV when you apply for job. That's the second skill. And the third skill that I would highly recommend is communication. So how to have the courage to share your thought, make argument, but still in a polite way, how to negotiate things, how to convincing others, how to communicate your ideas to others, and how to collaborate with others. So those skills sound very abstract, but I think it's very useful. And if you can keep practicing it, even it's just on a theoretical level, it's still very useful. And when you actually come into the workplace, then you can actually practice it in the reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a good point about communication. And yeah, I think probably one of the main reasons we get you to do group coursework at university as well, to practice all of those communication skills. I particularly liked, yeah, negotiation tactics as part of that. That's great. Thanks, Cheryl. Sean, about what about yourself? Was there any skills that you perhaps didn't realize were as important kind of coming into the workplace?
It's probably more on the softer skills side, to be
Sure. Yeah.
honest. So yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
where Cheryl was mentioning kind of communication, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
very key.
Mm-hmm.
Being clear, concise, structured, and that's both written and verbal. So when you're sort of like emailing anybody, when you're sort of talking to them through any analysis that you've done,
Mm-hmm.
setting the context, making sure that you're clear, consistent, and that is very, very important. I think also sort of if you're going into kind of maybe a consulting or kind of like open industry, like having kind of commercial awareness, sort of being
Mm-hmm.
aware of sort of what's going on in whether it be your sector or your competency, like having a good understanding of that is going to stand you in good stead as well. So those are the two I'd probably touch on that are less sort of blindingly obvious to me, because I sort of did computer science as my first degree and just come out with the technical skills.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you're having to go, right, okay, I know all of this stuff, but having to, be aware of what else is going on in the industry, and then also be able to sort of like clearly communicate what I'm doing and how I'm doing
Yeah.
it is very important.
Yeah. Brilliant. Great. Yeah. Communication again. That's two votes for communication. Beth, anything that you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I won't stick on communication for too long, given that Sean and Cheryl have mentioned it, but I would just like to put a third vote for that one too. I thought that I knew how to write an email, and turns out they need to be much shorter and much more to the point than I expected. I think the first couple of emails I opened up in the working world, I thought everyone was being really rude. Turns out they're just being time efficient. So yeah, that definitely is a skill that kind of becomes, I think, increasingly important as you move through your career, is being able to articulate your points. And to Cheryl's earlier argument with data as well, making effective communication rather than just communicating for the sake of it. I think the other thing I would add is time management and prioritization. I think especially if you are undertaking a role which requires a qualification, like an accountancy qualification or a project management, or kind of, there are so many out there. Being able to juggle your workload and your exam prep, but to be honest, it expands even beyond that. Even just juggling important tasks at work in general is a real because everything's important at the same time, right? And everything needs to be delivered as quickly as possible. So it's being able to navigate, okay, what do I actually need to prioritize here, and setting boundaries as well. Otherwise, you just end up burnt out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think all really great things there. So thank you so much for that. So maybe kind of the next tranche of questions we've got a couple that have come in on the Q&A, but ones that we planned to ask already, so that's great. But maybe having a little bit of a pivot now to kind of a few sort of more sort of like London focused questions, if that's okay. We've got a few to choose from here. I think let's go with kind of a broader one. So for all the panelists again, what do you enjoy most about living in London? And is there anything that you find kind of challenging? So Beth, we could start with you on that one, please.
I'm going to start with the challenging and then end on the positive. I honestly, it's nothing to do with London, really. I grew up in the countryside, and I miss the farms. So that would be my biggest bugbear with London, is that it is a city, so you can't really get away from that fact. However, I think the things I enjoy most about London is it feels so vibrant, and it feels so kind of exciting. I think, on any given day, you could be going to the theatre, you could be going to a gig, you could just be finding a new place for dinner, and ultimately that can only be because of all of the kind of opportunity that's around you. So I think there's this kind of sense that, and I don't know whether it's kind of sector specific either, but I definitely feel the sense in my sector that everyone's kind of moving towards ambitious goals, and you know, everyone working towards that creates that sense of community that Sean alluded to earlier as well. So yeah, I think there's so much fun to be had in London in addition to the work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, having lived there, I can absolutely attest to that. We might ask you about affordable ways to enjoy London, given, you know, cost of living being in the news a little bit. But that'll be a separate question. But that's great. Yeah. Cheryl, over to you. What do you find like the most enjoyable parts of living in London, but also any challenges that you feel that you might face specifically from living there?
So I'm from Vietnam, and I moved to the UK, I think nearly 4 years ago, and moved to London nearly 3 years ago. So I wasn't in the West in the past. I was from a country in very East. So moving to the UK in general, or London in particular, is like a very different to me. Is a life-changing experience. If anyone here is from Asia, probably you will understand my point of view, and also understand the difference versus West and versus East of the world. And then the thing I really like about London is diversity. You can meet everyone from all around the world, exposed to all of the culture, and then have food from all around the world. So I think that is kind of like the most interesting things to me. And the second thing I love about London is never ends with activities. There always something new coming up, or always have some like entertainment activities. Like literally you can explore every day, and then things change so quick and so fast. The third thing I liked about London is freedom, because I feel like you can do whatever you want, be whatever you want, and then nobody really judge on you, because people will mind their own business. And it's kind of like a city of diversity and of freedom. So I think it's very ideal for young people. Um, and then in terms of challenge, I think these point probably Sean and Beth might agree with me, is London can be very big, but and then have many people, but sometimes feel a bit lonely because it's too big. There's too many things that going on. And then you feel like, oh, you have to catch up with this, or like either you catch up with it or you will be left behind. Or maybe because it's so big and everyone is very like always in the rush. So you feel very difficult to make like a really deep connections, or have a slow living style to build that connection.
Yeah.
So that is one challenge that I faced. The other challenge is because everything was so expensive. I think that everybody will agree with me. So I think because things very expensive, then you have to be strategic with your spending. If you want to have investment, like if you want to have some asset, some investment for the future, you really need to know how to spend your money wisely. Otherwise, things expensive and always new thing coming up, always have a new entertainment, and you just like spend, and you end up to be like maybe living paycheck by paycheck, that you just spend all of the money and looking forward to the next payment, or you maybe like be on debt. So you should be strategic with the spending in London.
It's very good. You can lose money very quickly, I think, in London by doing lots of different activities, but there's so much to choose from as well. But yeah, I might have a follow-up question about that as well, actually. But just sort of last but not least, just to kind of hear from Sean, really. Yeah, your things that you enjoy most, but things that you perhaps find maybe a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, so I think the challenging aspects probably already touched on. So the cost of living can be one. So you need to kind of be careful with where you live, what locations you choose, what your commute is, because the further you go out, the more expensive your commute will be. So it's about trying to balance all of that. Then I suppose one maybe hasn't been touched upon is probably work-life balance. You probably just need to sort of make sure you're kind of aware of it and making sure that you sort of like allow yourself time outside of work to sort of like try and pursue your interests. And if you're new to London, there's a club or something to do for everybody. So make sure you sort of do take the time to try and sort of do that stuff.
Yeah.
And then in terms of kind of like opportunities, I mean, or the better things, I think one is probably the amount of opportunities that there will be. So you go to London, for example, and you could be in a job for a year, 18 months. Turns out it's not quite right for you. You're not sure. Like, there are so many other places that you could go and do sort of like very similar or exactly the same type of work. I know many of my friends have sort of, going from job to job to job, and all of their offices will be on the same street, right? So the amount of sort of opportunity career-wise is is very, very varied and and a lot. So, and it's great. You meet a lot of different people from different backgrounds, similar interests. So overall, I think at sort of London, there are sort of like difficult things that you have to manage and get used to, but I think it grows on you you sort of like end up kind of like loving London as a city to live in. I mean, living in London in the summer, going to some of the places is fantastic. It's great.
Yeah, there's a lot happening. I think just to sort of Beth, your comment as well at the minute around about sort of missing the countryside. I think that's something that I definitely felt. But I read a statistic around about, I think London has the most green space per head of any capital city as well. So I think it's probably not now at this time of year, but and think of free stuff to do is like enjoying some of those like green spaces. It's always like very, very nice and very free activity to do when the weather's a bit better. I suppose just to jump on the back of something that you just said there, Sean, so I might kind of start with you and might be somewhat of a contentious question around accommodation. And I guess we've had one question that's kind of come in on our Q&A. And we've got one as well, but it's more a little bit around about like, I guess, what was your approach to kind of planning things like accommodation and figuring out where to live? So just if you could kind of address that sort of more broadly in terms of, I guess, your personal insights to where possibly might be a bit cheaper if people are being, conscious of their wallet. And also that piece around about commuting as well, because I think it is that kind of thing that I used to find that if you live further out, accommodation might be cheaper, but then that's always sometimes outweighed with the cost of commuting in, isn't it?
Yeah. So I sort of grew up on the outer skirts of London, not too far from Heathrow Airport. But I now live in Harrow, which is sort of in kind of northwest London. And the reason I chose that was it's not too far away for family and friends where I grew up. But secondly, I wanted my commute to be less than an hour, but sort of like relatively straightforward and simple. So, and what I mean by that is I have to get 2 tubes, and the difference between those 2 tubes is I walk about 10 feet from one platform to the other. So like that to me is sort of like an easy commute, and I'm in the office in like less than an hour. And I think less than an hour in London is sort of manageable and reasonable.
Lovely. Yeah.
However, the cost of that isn't too much for me now. But as I sort of like am getting sort of like more senior and my salary is kind of matching that, I'm looking at moving probably to outside the M25 for the first time. So potentially where I'll be getting an overground train in. And my advice there is that, like, if you're sort of like living in kind of zones 2, 3, 4 on the tube map, like going outside of London, your costs will significantly step up, because then you're on different overground train lines which are not covered by TfL, so they're sort of like mostly private companies. And I like, if you're going to live and work in London and you don't necessarily have like a place to stay with family or friends outside of London, I'd recommend sort of being at least zone 5 and inwards.
Okay.
There will be sort of like rental cost differences, east, west, north, south.
Yeah.
Then it's all about just sort of like trying to map out what sort of commute you want to have. Where are the people that, if you already have friends or family living in London, like where are they based, and trying to sort of like identify a few locations where you can you could potentially base yourself.
Yeah, I think that's all very, very solid advice. Thank you very much. Beth, I don't know whether there's anything else that you would kind of add to that, just in terms of things like more pragmatics around finding accommodation, or kind of taking things like commute into consideration.
Yeah, I feel quite passionately about this topic. So when I first moved to London, kind of similar to Sean, I grew up not too far away. It's probably about an hour into Liverpool Street. But I moved to London in that kind of post-COVID bubble when things were quite cheap. Everyone that I went to uni with all moved to Clapham, and there's like a bit of a stereotype of students moving to Clapham. For good reason. It was like good fun. It felt a bit like we were continuing the university journey. And when kind of rent started to go back up to, I guess, like normal prices, I looked at moving just down the road, essentially, to Southwest London, in Tooting. And my commute ended up being like over an hour for such a short amount of miles, of commuting from Southwest London just to West London in Hammersmith. And it was 3 tube changes. And to Sean's point, it just was like, not only was it super long, it was also costing me quite a lot. And it was so much time. So I actually ended up moving out of London for a little bit, to kind of just reestablish. I now live kind of Islington area. My commute is 25 minutes. So, and it's just genuinely changed my life.
Under half an hour, winning.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, I mean, that's not always possible, right? I mean, it depends where your offices are, but I would highly recommend using office location as a starting point. But then also testing the areas. Like, I love Islington. It's got loads of nice cafes. It's got the kind of fitness studios that I kind of enjoy going to. Loads of my friends love East London. Some of them prefer South. Like, you do, I think, just by visiting the areas themselves, get a feel for where you want to live, and ultimately you're spending such a huge amount of money on it that you do want to make sure that it's for you. And I guess when you first move, most people go into flat sharing. There's plenty of sites that can help with that. Spare Room was one that I used for a short time, and then moved in with friends. But it definitely is a way to keep down the costs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think London almost sometimes feels like sort of like almost small, distinct cities in itself, or small villages, doesn't it? So I think that's a really great tip in terms of just sort of like, if you get the opportunity to get down there, maybe visit a few of the areas and kind of get a feel for it. Yeah, absolutely. Cheryl, last but not least, anything that you would like to kind of add on sort of the accommodation front in terms of hints and tips for finding it, or anything else that you think our listeners should take into consideration if they are thinking about moving to London?
I think Spare Room is a good platform. And then just one note when you're looking for a flatmate or a share flat in Spare Room is because things in London move very quickly. So if you view something that you really like, then you should make the decision like within 1 or 2 weeks maximum. Then they will require you to move in as soon as possible. So just act fast if you find something that really interested in. So this is one note, and the other note, let me remember. The other note is another way to kind of like save costs, that probably explore some secondhand furniture or like secondhand stuff, because in London things move very fast. People go in and then go out, so there will be a lot of forum, communities, Facebook group that they will share or exchange secondhand goods. So make use of it as well.
Yeah, no, some great practical tips there. So yeah, thank you so much for that as well. So I think we've got around about sort of 15 minutes left for this afternoon. I was wondering whether sort of a couple of questions that we've had that have kind of come in on the Q&A, and also one that we'd really hope to kind of ask you, sort of a couple of questions around building networks as well. I guess you guys are all part of like that Newcastle alumni network community as well. So sort of a couple of questions that have come in and around about like how important was networking either to find your job, but I think also important for people to hear sort of within your job as well. And part of that could be around about more some of the social aspects as well. Have you kind of used any networks to sort of build friendship groups or kind of make friendship groups in London as well? So kind of a bit of a double header there. So Sean, I don't know whether you would be okay starting us off with that one.
Sure. So for me, it may be a little bit different. I kind of grew up in London, so I sort of had a bit of a network kind of already of friends and family there. But there's so many sort of like clubs, and I played a lot of football, not so much now. There's so many running clubs that you can just go to and join, and you'll meet people on those. Obviously, there's a Newcastle alumni network in London as well, where there's definitely like 3 or 4 events of the year. So I just sort of like, you got to kind of put yourself out there, do what you love, and chances are that if there's quite a few people on this panel, so there's probably going to be some people that at university right now that will probably be going to London. So have those conversations with your sort of classmates at the moment and see who else is going, because then you can potentially plan to sort of like share a place together.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose just a little bit of a flip side to that as well, then, Sean, with your experiences. We've had like a couple of questions around about networking, but sort of specifically related to sort of finding a job and sort of within your job. Is that something that you found was kind of a useful tool in your job search strategy, or do you kind of build sort of professional networks within your role as well?
I think it becomes more important at the more senior end that you get. I don't necessarily think it's as important at the sort of grad level. However, those people that sort of do reach out, do sort of like try and be a little bit proactive, you can include that in your CV, and that will probably stand you out a little bit better. However, I think it's probably more something as you network and get to know people in your industry or whatever you do, that becomes slightly more important the more senior you get. I wouldn't place too much emphasis on it early on, but again, if you sort of want to connect with kind of me, if you're interested in consulting, or any of the other panelists, I'm sure they won't mind.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Cheryl, any thoughts on sort of networking, either sort of on that two sides of the coin there, to help build maybe friendship groups sort of while you're in London, but also from more of a kind of a professional context in either finding jobs or in your job role at the moment?
So there is the WhatsApp group for Newcastle alumni in London.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I think if you move to London or work in London and you are a Newcastle alumni, then feel free to join that WhatsApp group, because we will organize just a social event. The other things that I would recommend, update your LinkedIn, because it might help you to build a good image to your recruiter, and it might help you to apply for a job. Third point is maybe keep an eye on your community in London, because there will be a lot of for example, Vietnamese community, because I'm from Vietnam, or like US community, or maybe Asia communities, like some sort of community in London.
Yeah.
And then keep an eye on the Eventbrite as well, that platform where you can find like all type of events in London, and you can go to the event that you're interested in, maybe event relating to your professionals or event relating to your hobbies. So this is also a very good platform.
Yeah, I think I was always quite surprised, like, again, just with that sort of cost of living in mind, like how much free stuff there is to do in London on sites like Eventbrite or meetup groups and things like that, isn't it? So I think it can seem daunting as first moving to a big city if you don't have any sort of particularly sort of like friendship groups, but it sounds like there's quite a lot of opportunities to kind of get involved there. Yeah. Last but not least, Beth, anything that you would kind of add to that on kind of networking, either for kind of more social purposes or in terms of finding and securing job opportunities?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think in terms of establishing kind of a friendship group out of work opportunities really is down to the individual, but also down to the company you join. I know some people who've kind of gone to work for, say, the Big Four, who have ended up with kind of their main friendship group from London being their work friends because they're all joining at the same time. They go on, you know, these events that bring them together for that purpose. My job probably kind of too far away from that in the sense that I'm working mainly with people who are a lot older than me, who have families, who are very kind of settled. So I think there is a huge difference depending on like where you end up working. Having said that, I would say wherever you do end up, we're obviously in a kind of position now where we can work from home a lot more. My particular experience and advice would be to, if you can go into the office, do so. I'm not saying for 5 days a week, but I think the thing that helped me move within my old company to kind of end up getting the role I wanted was having those kind of coffee conversations with people and just finding out what was out there. A lot of like the job I've now ended up in, I didn't know even existed, and it was only when I was speaking to someone about the kind of skills that I enjoyed doing at work. But then at the time I was like, oh, but I don't like this aspect of it. And my old kind of peer at work was like, oh, you should join this team because they do exactly, and I just wouldn't have had any idea about it. So I think that's where connecting with people in the workplace can be super valuable. It's just finding out what's out there, and generally people are willing to talk. Like if you say to anyone, do you want to go for a coffee, the chances are they're not going to say no. And the best piece of advice I got given was get people talking about themselves because they love it.
Yes.
So kind of with that in mind, I think networking in a professional capacity is super important. The final thing I would add is, whilst I think it is important to have your kind of professional network within your workplace, I found it really important to have a network outside of that, so that when it came to moving companies, I was able to talk freely and candidly and have conversations about potential interviews upcoming and things like that, which I didn't feel like I could do with the people in my workplace. So I think having a mixture of the two is super valuable.
No, that's great. I think that's it's a fantastic tip around about like getting people talking about themselves. Just even having some of that physical presence sometimes in the office can be really beneficial to kind of just those sort of water cooler moments and kind of catch people and have those sort of like slightly more non-scheduled conversations. Can be really handy. Well, look, we've got around about 6 minutes left. That's gone really quickly. Maybe just last one question that we've had in that sort of, I guess, links back to kind of some of the sort of the initial things that we were talking around about. I guess twofold questions. So one is any recommendations from you for finding and applying for jobs in the region, and then also any just very quick hints and tips for the CVs and cover letters, which obviously is still incredibly prevalent as part of the application process. So Sean, if that's all right, if we kick off with you just for those last couple of little bits there.
Yeah, sure. So I think most financial services, technology, and large consultancies are going to have offices in London. So there's chances are there's going to be a lot of jobs to apply for. In terms of CV tips and cover letters, I think I saw something in the Q&A on being sponsored. I can only really talk from PwC perspective, but like in the application process, it's like I conducted, I don't know how many interviews, and I do them grad level at all levels into experience hires at PwC. It's not something that we're ever told if someone is a sponsored candidate or not. If your CV is good enough, it will get through the process. It's an afterthought. Because there's obviously a process that has to go on for the HR and legal teams to make sure that you can get the visas and so on. It's all done on sort of like competency, skills, and what you put forwards. In terms of like what to get on your CV and what to put on sort of cover letters, you're going to come potentially with a lot of similar sort of like hard technical skills. So if you're doing technical degrees, whether that be sort of like in computer science, whatever, or sort of like financial accounting and so on, it's doing bits and pieces that make you stand out, like outside of those, outside of your core technical skills. You know, like what are you doing elsewhere in the university? What are you doing sort of like with your spare time? Are you like, and I value this as from a grad interviews, like, are people sort of, if someone's working a part-time job and studying, I think that goes to show that they're very committed and hardworking, and they're still getting good grades. Then they're like, right, okay, like this is someone that I want in my team. This is someone I want to work with. So I would try and emphasize as much as you possibly can experience that you have outside of your sort of core technical degree, and bring that as much as you can to sort of the forefront, and the skills and the softer skills that they've provided you. I tend to try and place a lot on that, because at PwC we get hundreds and hundreds of applications, and those are the people that tend to stand out a little bit more for me.
No, that's great. I think that's really encouraging to hear, actually, Sean. Sometimes I think some students sometimes think, or conversations that we have around, oh, do they really want to hear about my part-time job in Tesco? And it's like, well, yeah, if you're doing all of this other stuff around it and managing to fit it in, that's great. Lovely. Yeah, thanks so much. Cheryl, I know you talked earlier a lot around about kind of that leadership piece from kind of Amazon perspective. I'm assuming all of your opportunities are very well advertised online as well, but from maybe more kind of from an application perspective, any other kind of hints and tips there that you might have for our students on the call today?
I would say two things. One is when you see the job advert and then you kind of like build your CV, make sure that your CV is aligned with the job description, meaning that all of the keywords in the job description somehow it will appear here and there in your CV, and then your CV, your strength will align with the requirement of the job description. And then another tips is leverage AI to customize your CV or your what's the reference letter? Is that like a
cover letter? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm still
Leverage
going strong.
AI
Yeah.
to customize cover letter and CV, and then kind of like having one specialized version for each type of the job that you apply to.
Yeah, absolutely. And for students on the call and alumni, we do have an AI tool that can help you with that called Career Set. I don't know if Gemma, you could pop that in the chat at the bottom as well. But yeah, that's great. Last but not least, Beth, I know you said that, I guess with the role that you've found internally, that kind of came through slightly through kind of networking, but in terms of, I guess, finding job opportunities, have you found that they've been kind of quite well advertised in terms of what you've been looking for? And then obviously the other part of that question, just any final hints and tips for students when it comes to applications?
Yeah, I think don't be afraid to just email, like, especially if it's a smaller company, don't be afraid to just email and say, what opportunities do you have? And I would maybe say this is more relevant if you know what specific sector you want to be in and what specific job role, because if you know both of those two things, actually you can pretty quickly find out which companies are going to be hiring. As an example, like the role I'm doing, investor relations at a listed company in the UK, suddenly you actually narrow it down to quite a small pool relatively, and then out of those that are actually hiring, it's even smaller. I think use the job sites to your advantage in terms of, like, there is loads of stuff on LinkedIn jobs. You can get notifications for daily, that kind of thing. But I think to kind of build on what the others were saying, the CV gets you through the door, but if you can't speak to it, there's kind of no point doing it. I was always surprised at how many people we would interview that it was almost like they hadn't written their CV themselves. So yes, complete believer in use the tools available because everyone's using them, right? You kind of have to stay competitive. But practice speaking about yourself and practice like bigging yourself up. I think a lot of people have an issue with sitting in a room because it feels horrible. It feels like you shouldn't be doing it. But have those conversations, whether that's with family members, whether that's with, maybe your parents' friends or people at the university who would be willing to spend some time with you, your tutors, things like that, just to get that practice in, because otherwise when it comes to that first interview, it can feel a little bit unusual. Just get comfortable with speaking.
I think that's something, absolutely, that applications, part perhaps been heavily used by AI, and then being able to kind of articulate that. Sort of, there's a little bit of a difference there. And again, just a shameless plug for a couple of bits in the career serverless. Don't forget, if you're a current student or a recent grad, you've got access to the platform called Graduates First, where you can practice the pre-recorded video interviews. You can book a 20-minute guidance to do some practice interview questions with us. And then where possible, we can also put you into a longer mock interview as well, which that's what I was doing this morning with my time. Yeah, so that's taken us, we're 2 minutes over. Sorry, that's my bad timekeeping. But just a couple of things just to wrap up there. Like, one, obviously, like, a huge thanks to all of our 3 panelists today. Just some really interesting insights, I think, into your individual careers, but some like really nice, pragmatic and sensible tips in terms of like how people can kind of start navigating potentially sort of the move to London. And also, yeah, it's nice to hear that it's kind of things like the Newcastle Alumni Network there, if people, you know, want to reach out and kind of get involved and kind of build that little bit more of a sense of community and network in the capital city as well. So thank you so much for that. The last little thing from me is just a reminder to students on the panel that you can sign up for the 60-minute mentoring sessions, which I am desperately trying to add a link for as well in the background, which I'll add in the background. It's going to be a long one, sorry, but you can sign up to those, and Gemma's just put the message in there around about how you can do that. So there we go. Oh, that's horrible. Sorry, I don't know how to make that smaller and prettier, but there we are. So that's in the box there. But yeah, obviously, from us, thank you so much for joining us, to the attendees, and also to our panelists again. So that's it from us today, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. If anybody on the call is interested for this same conversation, but for some of our alumni in the US, don't forget we're running a session tomorrow afternoon on the same topic as well. But for now, thanks so much for dialing in, and for our panelists for taking part. Thanks very much. Bye, guys.